All right, welcome back. This is Dr. Mike, and I'm here once again with Logan. We're going to be talking about human nutrition, detoxification, and possibly a little bit about the carnivore diet today. We're here to talk about the solution, not talk about what the problem is so much. What are we going to do about it? So Logan, welcome back.
Thank you, Mike.
I have been looking forward to talking with you about this. I always enjoy talking with you. And you said that you brought along a couple of books with some new information. Last time we talked, you had done a turpentine cleanse. And part of the turpentine cleanse was you did the carnivore diet with it. And you've repeatedly called the carnivore diet an elimination diet, or possibly a rejuvenation diet. And so these are all topics that I'm looking forward to talking with you about. You said you had come upon some new information that you'd like to talk about first that might put some stuff into context. So what's on your mind with the new information?
Well, as you recall, obviously, we've done two segments. We did a part one and a part two of a discussion about using that turpentine protocol, which is basically pure gum spirits, as a detoxification tool within the context of terrain theory. And we talked about terrain theory in some depth the first two interviews we've done. And I chose one of three options with that turpentine protocol for dietary elimination while you were doing the detox. You could choose, this was Dr. Andrew Kaufman's protocol.
Yes.
You could choose a vegetarian elimination diet, a fruitarian elimination diet, or carnivore. An elimination diet just means you're setting aside all these potentially inflammatory foods and eating a very simple diet so you're not tweaking the body to react to things mixed in with a whole bunch of other stuff. You'll never figure out what's making you inflamed or producing mucus. And that's the way I was looking. I chose carnivore because I'd done it before. So I did that for 6 weeks, including the 30 days of turpentine therapy last December of 2024. Then you and I came back together again in January, and we kind of reviewed my progress. I lost about 15 pounds effortlessly over the course of that period. But at the time, I was only looking at the carnivore diet really as an elimination tool, as a tool of detox. I wasn't looking at it as a nutritional diet, and feeding the body the nutrients that it really needs to regenerate, heal, and thrive. So since then, I started digging into it more, and I'd actually done the carnivore 7 years prior. And in that 7-year window, as I started researching carnivore, I was floored with how the topic has just exploded over that period. The volume of content on YouTube and the websites and the medical research was just stunning to me, how much has moved forward in those 7 years. So I got together with you for coffee about 6 weeks ago, and I pitched this idea of doing a part 3 on terrain theory and human nutrition, because I really had the light bulb moment come on that I had been focusing so much of my own research and efforts on my healing journey on toxins, avoiding them and getting rid of them. But very little of my research had been going into supernutrition and what is the proper human diet? What are the essentials that we should be including in our diet, not just the things we should be excluding? So as I looked into that, I learned a whole bunch of new stuff about not just carnivore, but the idea of making foods with animal fats, red meat, eggs, dairy, a key part of your ongoing diet. It doesn't have to be exclusive. I happen to be doing carnivore again now, as you know. And some of the things I learned, Mike, is, one of the most fundamental ones that caught my attention is among the 3 broad categories of macronutrients: proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is the only one of those categories that the human body can thrive without at all. You can't survive without protein. You can't survive without fat, but you can survive and you can thrive without external carbohydrates. Well, the reason that is the body actually runs on 2 fuel sources. A lot of us think of, and as an athlete, I was conditioned to believe that sugar was the primary fuel source for my muscles as a cyclist and as a runner. And that's why you would carbo load the night before a race and eat pasta and potatoes and all this stuff, rice. all that stuff that would do carbohydrates. Well, the body does run on glucose. But the reason it doesn't need external carbohydrates is it can make its own glucose from animal fats, particularly animal fats. It's called glucogenesis. And what we want to remember, though, is that glucose is not a sustainable fuel that you should be running off of day in, day out. It's a fight or flight fuel. A glucose spike gives you the juice to run away from that saber-toothed tiger or to fight, the enemy tribe. That's a short-term, high-energy, high-dose fuel. But the fuel that should honestly more healthily sustain us metabolically on a day-to-day basis is formed from ketones. Ketones come from fat the same way glucose comes from sugar. But the body doesn't have to have external carbohydrates to make its sugar. It can do it on its own. That was an aha for me. I did not know that after all this research through the decades. So I started looking into that further. And then when you and I had coffee, I said to you, well, I did 30 days in December, but I'm going to try 90 days of carnivore. I'm going to try it longer because I've been sick for a long time, and I think you've got to do something sustainably to see if you're going to get tangible results. An experiment of one, that's all it is. And that's all I have to experiment on. I'm my own guinea pig. And as of today of this taping, the reason we chose this day is I'm 60 days into it. So I've been doing it for twice as long as I did last December. I'm continuing to lose weight, but what I've really noticed, Mike, is a reduction in some chronic symptoms that I've had as long as you and I have known each other. It's really common among the Lyme support group members that we all know. I had really bad kind of total body inflammation, particularly in my knees, my fingers, my elbows, joint inflammation that could get tweaked really easily when I would do an activity. And then I had some really bad bloating problems, particularly around my middle. I had been carrying toxic weight around my middle for most of the last decade. Even though I used to be a pretty active athlete, I just couldn't seem to get rid of it. And in the last 60 days, this is, again, subjective, but I'd say the inflammation is 80% better, and I'd definitely say the same thing with the bloating and the visceral weight. And that's not so subjective because I'm wearing pant sizes. That's where I seem to be losing the weight naturally.
Right.
And I wasn't doing it purely for weight loss. I was doing it for health. But the body is so intelligent. If you give it the macronutrients that it really needs on a sustainable way, as well as doing your daily detox and avoiding toxins, it will use that energy in a prioritized manner. And for me, I think it was looking at healing stuff before you start getting rid of toxic weight.
Great.
And I think that it happens, hand in glove, but it happens naturally, differently for every person. Because my toxic journey is different than yours.
Right.
My nutrition journey is different than yours, and that's true for all of us. But, knock wood, so far so good, 60 days in. Another 30 days, I'm definitely committed to 90. I'm pretty certain I'm going to continue this on well after that and see where this takes me down the line.
I'm interested to see how easy it is for you to do this. But I want to back up because when you say something like carnivore diet, people focus on the carnivore and they think it's about eating a lot of meat. But you've repeatedly called it an elimination diet. So it would seem to me that, and you also said that the carnivore, the meat contains everything that you need to live on. By the nature of that statement, it would seem like you're eliminating certain things, but you're also giving it certain things. So it's not all about eating meat, even though it's called the carnivore diet. It's about eliminating certain other things. And after talking with you, it makes more sense to me that meat is more dense in nutrients.
Very nutrient
And it's
rich.
going to have stuff to give. But by that very nature, it means that other things that we eat are less dense in nutrients and might possibly be lacking. But that doesn't completely explain why all of this inflammation is going away. What could it be about eliminating vegetables and fruits and other things that could cause the the inflammation to go away. So it's not necessarily what the meat is all doing for you. It's eliminating this stuff, is allowing inflammation to go away. That is a huge benefit that you don't think about necessarily. If you focus on eating the meat, you're missing this whole other aspect.
Your teachings actually help me to answer that question. So let's set aside for the time being that the meat itself, the carnivore foods, are nutrient dense, and that's really good. And we're going to set that aside, though. We're going to look at what you get rid of when you're exclusively eating that kind of category.
How does that detoxify?
So you get rid of you get rid of plants and fruits. That's one big category. You know, actual whole foods, other whole foods. You're getting rid of those, but you're also getting rid of all the processed stuff. So you help me understand the critical role of enzymes in our diet. And when you eat foods that don't come with their own enzymes, then your body has to leach its own limited store of enzymes in order to process and digest those. So let's think of what I used to eat tons of when I was an athlete. And I mentioned this in one of the other interviews. I was a 20-year vegetarian, a very ignorant one.
Wow.
Because I was burning so many calories as an athlete, I thought I could eat anything. Tons of pasta, tons of bread, tons of rice, ice cream, you know, sugar, 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 sugar. So, but not only the sugar, all those other foods I mentioned don't come with their own enzymes. When you get a box of pasta at the store, there's a reason you can set it on the shelf and 20 years later it'll look the same way. It does not spoil. It has no enzymes. It's not true with whole foods. You put a piece of meat on the counter and leave it for 3 days, you do not want to eat it after 3 days. Same with an apple, an orange, you know, anything that disintegrates on its own, it has the seeds of its own destruction as a part of the food. But that's also what makes it easy to digest and convert into metabolic energy in your body. So processed foods is one big category that you're not forcing your body to figure out a way to digest something that's undigestible and leaching its own tools. That's processed foods. Plus you're eliminating all the toxins that come with them, all the toxic seed oils that are in virtually every processed food that we have access to has canola oil and great rapeseed oil and soybean oil, none of which existed prior to World War II. They're all industrial seed productions that if you read the process, you'd never give it to your dog, your children, or yourself.
Wow.
You know, it's just nasty stuff, and the body sees it as a poison and has to do something with it. That's different than butter, than beef tallow, than olive oil, avocado oil. Those aren't made from seeds. And then if you think about the seeds themselves and the other whole foods, nature, if I'm a plant, I don't want you eating my seeds. What are my seeds for? To propagate the species.
Yes.
So there are literally in every plant, every fruit, and every seed, things like oxalates, lectins, anti-nutrients they call it. They're defense mechanisms in the plants and organisms that retard and defer a species from wanting to eat them. And when you do eat them, they can be inflammatory. Hence, you're eliminating those inflammatory foods when you do like the carnivore diet, because you never know until you try an elimination diet, what are you reacting to? Am I producing mucus because of milk? Am I producing achy joints because of tomatoes? That's all an elimination diet is supposed to do, is simplify an eating pattern for a while. But the aha for me was, as a 20-year vegetarian, that was my diet leading right up to when I became chronically ill. I'm convinced now in hindsight that that was a huge component of why I got ill. I had depleted my body over 20 years. You know, as an athlete, I'm running it ragged, but I wasn't putting nutrients in. I was deficient in healthy animal fats. You know, animal fats and red meat have been demonized through the years by the very same people and industries that put together this ridiculous food pyramid that we've all been brought up believing. You know, the same industry that produces aisles in the grocery store of nothing but sugary cereals and then conditions our children from the time they can watch a cartoon that that's what you want to eat every Saturday morning. And anybody walking on this earth right now understands that that's not good for you. It's just not good for you. You know, so, you know, that to me is some of the ahas that I've had in reframing what I'm thinking about when I look at the carnivore diet. I see it as, yes, it's an elimination diet because I'm restricting in a very measured and thoughtful way what I'm putting in my body. But at the same time, I'm choosing things that go into my body that are highly nutritious. The last piece of that puzzle, Mike, is something I learned. My grandmother and I spent most of my summers at her farm, was a beef cattle farmer and a dairy cattle farmer.
Okay.
So I had personal experience with eating meat freshly butchered and having milk straight from the cow with no processing, every night. Those are super nutritious food sources. There's a reason we've been using those for as long as humans have been walking around. It's not to say that some of these other foods aren't complementary, and that a bear eats blueberries in the fall when they're trying to put on extra food, but blueberries is not their primary species specific food source. Every animal on this planet has a species specific nutritional food source.
Mm-hmm.
Where did we come up with this idea that we want to eat everything under the sun, no matter where it's produced on the planet, no matter what the season is, and we want to have a balanced diet? Well, I'm a student of history, and that's how I accessed the falsity of germ theory, was looking at its origins and the motivations and the influencers in play at that time. And money and corporations and industry were always, at the root. And the idea of the sad American diet that we deal with right now, it didn't come about randomly. It came about, honestly, for profit, but not for human health. And now you've got, honestly, a distorted medical system, hand in glove with a distorted food system. And until we wake up to that and start doing our own research and our own learning, which is, you mentioned these books. I brought these because these were critical books that kind of helped me peel away what I'd been conditioned to believe growing up in the United States of America, that I believe was a big part of what brought me to ill health and so many others. And what I've come to set that aside and relearn things. This book I read in September of 2020,
Right.
The Contagion Myth by Thomas Cowan, Dr. Tom Cowan, and Sally Fallon Morell, who's a dietitian. This is an amazing book, and this was transformative. Immediately after that, read that book, The Invisible Rainbow, which is the history of electromagnetism and electromagnetic energy going back to the 1800s and its effects on human health. This starts out with when we put telegraph wires all across the U.S.
Wow.
And how train conductors and train engineers suddenly were falling ill because all the trains going across the U.S. were following telegraph lines.
Oh, wow.
Something I never knew about that in history. This is an amazing book, too. You and I talked about this book, which is only about a year and a half, a little more than a year old. Can You Catch a Cold? And it's really focuses on the unsuccessful attempts to prove germ theory over 100 years plus in the laboratory, failure after failure after failure to prove that bacteria are the cause of illness and that they can be transmitted from one person to another. And then this last book, Mike, that I just started reading on this topic. This is a psychiatrist, Dr. Georgia Eady, who wrote a book called Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. It's all about this nutrition topic. Not carnivore per se, but about a diet that is more species appropriate for human beings and eliminates processed food, which includes all carbohydrates virtually, and eliminates seed oils. And which is, I think, a huge piece of the puzzle, is getting rid of these things that are toxic to us, and then focusing on the super nutrition that comes from animal products. And that's, so all I'm eating right now, Mike, is super easy. I'm eating beef, bacon, butter, and eggs. I do have some sardines every now and then for the omega-6s, and that's totally fine on a carnivore diet.
Omega-3.
Omega-3, I'm sorry, got that backwards. Yeah, we get too much omega-6 already. But yeah, I eat sardines. You can eat oysters, that kind of thing. You can eat any meat. But the beautiful thing about red meat from cows is they're a ruminant animal who has a multi-chambered stomach. They have a unique ability to filter out toxins from the food they eat, unlike a single stomach animal like a pig or a chicken. Yes, their meat's fine too, but it's not as clean as a cow's will be. So a cow can eat grass covered with glyphosate all day long, which they are. We can't avoid glyphosate anymore, Roundup. But they filter it out to the point that by the time we eat their meat, we're not exposed like we would be directly to having the cucumbers that are bathed in glyphosate or the soybeans that are bathed in glyphosate. So there's not only the super nutrition that comes from red meat that contains its own amino acids and proteins and vitamins, minerals, but it's also much less toxic than other forms of natural foods, because of the way a cow's digestive system works. Those are all things I've just learned just the last 90 days. You can tell I'm kind of excited about diving into this, because for me personally, in my own journey of ill health, I think this is another key piece of the puzzle that I've got to address. I actually bought this book for each one of the next generation of kids in my immediate family for Christmas this year. My 2 nieces and my son, because I told them all, I said, if I knew at 30 years of age what I know now in this book, they're all 33, 32, and 29 right now. You and I would have never met, because I wouldn't have been chronically ill for the last 12 years. I truly believe that. The facts are there. And I really hope these next generations take some useful information from people like you and I we've had to go through the chronic illness journey. And I don't regret that, because I got to have friends like you through this, and I got to learn this stuff. But I sure hope it has a value beyond, just healing ourselves,
Right.
that other people can benefit. And that's why I, applaud you for doing this video series that you're doing. It's so critical.
One thing that you said that just still rings a bell with me, and it deals with how we've been misled and lied to. And we, told to eat all the colors of the rainbow, including white. But then, if we eat that, it means we're going to be eating, green leafy vegetables, and we're going to be eating fruit. But then you also had brought up, and this is an important point, is that the vegetables themselves, the plants, have their own defenses, and the plants don't want to be eaten. Now, I got these defenses right here.
And legs.
And legs, they can run away.
They can run away.
But the plants produce toxins also, and we can't taste the toxin that's in the plant, but it's there to keep bugs and other animals from eating it. Well, I'm an animal, and I'm kind of like a bug. And if we eat these foods that contain natural toxins that the plants themselves produce, it can make us sick.
Inflamed.
And on a chronic nature, it's producing all of this stuff. So the plants themselves can be making us sick. And it's something that people just shakes to the very fundamental core of what you think is true. And you've got to reevaluate this stuff like you've been doing. And then you test and you see the results.
Experiment.
And I'll be darned, they were right the whole time. If you eliminate plants and vegetables, you might feel better. But in terms of being a caveman and having to go out and kill an animal to eat it, that's the best prize we can get. But if I can't get me some meat, I might start eating this lesser quality food.
It's a substitute, which people have throughout history. You're absolutely right.
And we do have teeth that can break it down, but it's almost like this is the second-rate food. We want the gold star, but this is the silver star. I
mentioned bears, and that's a good example. A bear can't put on enough fat by eating blueberries to make it through the winter. So they're going to eat tons of salmon, deer, whatever. But they'll add the blueberries in right before they hibernate to get as many extra calories as they possibly can. In times of starvation, you're hunting the bison or whatever, or the large hoofed animal, and you go a couple of weeks without being able to take one down. Then you eat whatever you need to make it through the famine times. But they also fasted. Fasting is a therapeutic tool. The body knows what to do when you fast. It uses that energy to get rid of toxins that normally it doesn't have the energy to do because it's digesting food all the time. So, most answers in life are simple. And that's why this particular diet is so easy. And I'll tell you, Mike, it's a very satiating diet. I don't think about food all the time because I'm full. The fat itself is chemically made up to trigger the satiation cycle, and you feel full. You feel full in a sustained way. I don't get sugar spikes. I don't eat a big bowl of cereal at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. I need another boost. And then at 2 o'clock, I got to lay down and take a nap. I used to take a nap every afternoon for 20 years of my career. I remember it because I would, after lunch, I would be like, going downhill. None of that is in my mind. I don't think about what's the next thing I'm going to eat. I enjoy the eating. I look forward to it. It tastes good to me, but then I'm done and I'm off doing something else. I gave you the example before we started the taping. The last 2 days, I have done multiple hours of maintenance to my truck. I'm getting ready to do a trip about a month from now. So in the past, 6 months ago, when you and I first reconnected, when I got home, if I had done an hour or two, like change a tire, I literally would probably have to peel my fingers off the wrench or the screwdriver because my hands would be so stiff and sore, and my knees from getting down on my hips, and I'd be wrecked for the next couple of days. Well, I did this 2 days in a row, 4 hours one day, 2 hours the next, on a 98-degree day. Today's the next day after that. And you can tell I feel pretty good right now. And my fingers are not stiff. The two health-related symptomatic improvements over the last 60 days that I noticed the most is the belly shrinking, the bloating gone. I used to have gas issues that went along with that, and that's almost gone, and the inflammation. And honestly, it's strange to say this, but I feel like my brain's working better. I know I'm a chatty Cathy right now because I'm excited about this information, but I'm also excited the way my brain is working. It seems to be holding on to this information and being able to bring it back to mind more quickly. And that this book, she talks a lot about why that is. She talks about things like dementia in here and how dementia actually may be type 3 diabetes, a brain that can't use sugar anymore as a fuel because the whole body's been flooded with sugar for too many years. And that's what insulin resistance is. Glucose spike is the fire. Insulin is the water that puts it out. Well, if you keep lighting the fire multiple times a day, eventually there's not enough water to put it out and you get insulin resistance. You can't do it, which means the body can't use sugar as a fuel anymore efficiently. And what dementia and Alzheimer's very well be is a brain starving to death.
Right.
It can't operate because it can't use sugar. But if caught early enough and you start reintroducing the way the body wants to work is using ketones as a fuel and using sugar as a supplemental fuel for the fight or flight, you can heal a lot of things. And she has got case studies in here of having practical confirmed results from diet changes with dementia patient, at least equal to or better than the pharmaceuticals they're using. And if you could do it in a non-toxic way and get the same results versus the Ariceps and the Leqimbis and all these, pharmaceuticals that are pumping into dementia patients, why wouldn't you try that? That makes me excited.
Right.
We've all got dementia in our families these days. Why is that?
It shouldn't be. We're designed to heal. It's interesting, a minute ago, you were talking about a sugar spike, but you actually made your hand go down as you were talking about it.
Yeah, you get that spike and then crash.
And then get the refractory period where it goes, below normal.
Exactly.
Before it comes back up.
Where you feel like you got no energy whatsoever, and that's part of that cycle. It's part of that glucose spiking, sugar spiking, and then the insulin's got to come in and put the fire out.
As it relates to the brain, over the course of a lifetime, before you realize that you have a problem, your brain will run on fat or sugar, and it really prefers sugar. It's easier to break it down, it's faster energy, but it also burns up quicker.
Right.
And when you're on the sugar, and when you're young, sugar goes up and it comes back down to normal. But after decades of that, it starts dipping below normal, and then you go low blood sugar.
Right.
Well, when you're running on sugar, over the course of a lifetime, you're going to have these ups and downs, and you're never going to have smooth energy, because if you give it fat, you will have that nice smooth energy. And you really don't need a whole lot of fat to produce a whole lot of energy.
Well, and that's what happens when we do fast. Like, say, you're weeks in between the last kill of the caveman. When you're running off your own fat stores, you've still got energy. That's why the body in its genius stores the fat. When we eat too much sugar and the body's overloaded by sugar, or it's losing its ability to process sugar because of insulin resistance growing over time, it immediately takes that sugar and turns it into fat. And it's all it knows how to do. And that's why we walk around, because we don't need 100 pounds of extra fat cells to survive the next fast,
Ice
the
age.
next hunger, because we don't have that anymore. But that's why we've got so many people walking around, because the body sees that excess sugar as a toxin and says, I gotta do something with it. I can't get rid of it on a daily basis.
Yeah, and when that brain goes low blood sugar, it's starving.
Yep.
It's like putting a hand over your nose and you just can't get energy into it.
Right.
So a little bit of low blood sugar on the brain's okay, but when you dip and dip and dip over the course of a lifetime, you're starving your brain whenever you're in that low blood sugar.
And that's what I did for 20 years as an ignorant vegetarian. You know, I really wasn't concentrating on my protein sources. You know, I could eat a DiGiorno cheese pizza and call myself a vegetarian. But what am I eating?
Not helping.
You know, no. But, you know, and that's the kind of thinking, you know, I'm not alone in that, you know, that you think you're eating healthily, but you're not. I honestly have learned so much in just the last couple of months about the scientific nutritional value of animals, of animal fat, animal protein. It's just not replicable. You know, you can't mimic it with fake meat, you know, and soybeans. That's not to say that there's not some value. There is nutritional value in plants and fruits. There's no doubt about that. But again, you got to think about it from the plant's perspective. This species wants to thrive. It does not want you eating its babies, seeds, nuts. So there's a cost if you eat them. Yes, there may be some nutritional value in there, but there's also a debit to that credit. You know, that's not there from what I can tell with fish, you know, and chicken and pork and red meat. There's not a deficit to that. There's not a negativity to it. It's just nutritional support and the animal fats. You know, the key thing, it's ironic, Mike, that I'm eating tremendous amount more animal fat right now than I was 6 months ago, but I'm losing weight. So the idea of demonizing fat, my body now is taking fat and making it its primary fuel source. So I can work on my car all day long and not have to go take a nap, not feel like somebody beat me up the next day while my joints are achy. Because my body's not reacting to the inflammatory nature of some of the foods I was eating before. Something as simple as an apple. You know, even thinking something as simple as an apple, which I'm not against, but the apples that we eat now are all genetically modified. There's so much more sugar in an apple now because they want to sell them than the apple I would pull off in my grandmother's orchard. You know, people don't want to buy a bitter apple, but that's, you know, we pull those off and eat them. They want all sugar. So even the fruits and vegetables that we have access to in the grocery store are not quite the same fruits and vegetables from 100 years ago, and that's something to consider too. But I'm definitely not against, you know, integrating these other foods. If you want to eat some bread, I was a breadaholic, you know, I had childhood memories of my grandmother baking bread, and it makes my mouth water just to think about it. But think about it, you eat it consciously. Know that there may be a debit to the credit. And if you overdo it, you know, you're going to get that glucose spike, you're going to have the crash, and then you're going to want more and more and more. You will never feel satiated on refined carbohydrates, for sure.
So I'd like to ask you a little bit about the meal plan, but first, I don't hear people when they talk about the carnivore, and I don't know the answer to this. What about fish, seafood, scallops, and shrimp?
They're all good.
Okay.
They're all good, and they all have their own benefits. Like you mentioned, the omega fatty acids and some, and they're all totally cool on a carnivore diet. There's really not a lot of negative to them, except maybe certain species of fish may be more high in mercury because of the food chain and the amount that they accumulate. But as I mentioned, I eat sardines on a pretty regular basis. Some carnivores actually do something called a sardine fast, where they eat nothing but sardines for a number of days. I'm not attracted to that at all, but you know, to each his own. But there's nothing wrong with all those. Seafood's great. So is chicken, you know, pork. What I've learned is if you're in a chronic illness situation and you really want to focus on super nutrition and healing, you might be better off to be a little more restricted to start off.
Right.
And that's why there's 3 doctors I want to mention for your audience, just so they have them if they want to do their own research. These are 3 docs that I think you might call them the OG carnivore docs.
Okay.
The first one is the OG of OGs, Sean Baker, who at 58 now is a multi-time world champion power lifter and has been on Carnivore exclusively for over a decade. Dr. Ken Berry, these are all MDs. Dr. Ken Berry, who's down in Tennessee, and Dr. Anthony Chafee, who's a neurosurgeon and former professional rugby player, and he's down in Australia now. And all three of these guys have very active YouTube channels, share a ton of information, almost all of it for free. There are others, but these are the guys that have been at it the longest and share really valuable scientific information. You know, you and I are a lot alike in that I want to see the details. I want to read the studies.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody wants to do that, but I do. Because there's so many crappy studies out there that when you read them, you're like, how in the world did this ever make it into a journal? You know, when you read the methods section and it's not replicable and there's no control, you know, there's no isolation of the variable, there's no fulfillment of Koch's postulates. So these guys, you know, they never insult my intelligence. All three of those would be really good to follow up on and do your own research, you know, if you are interested in trying something like this. A lot of people might in as little as 30 days, and that's why I did it 30 days last December, especially if you've not been really chronically ill for a long period of time. In 30 days, it seems to be pretty consistent that people get enough objective feedback in their own experience that they can make a evaluation of, I think I'm going to try this a little longer. That it happens that fast. And a lot of it is inflammation and bloating seem to be two, but also brain fog. Brain fog seems to significantly lift, but all these other quote-unquote autoimmune conditions very consistently seem to show tangible results in a relatively short period of time. All three of those docs right now would say for a chronic illness patient, try it at least for 90 days, which is what I'm doing.
Yes. Yeah, I have seen gluten detox out of the body at the 30-day mark.
Isn't that amazing?
Their skin peeled like a snake, even their palms peeled, and it was the gluten leaving the body.
Wow.
And so from that experience, you know, that's just something leaving the body. And for people that only do carnivore, at that 30-day mark, they don't really know quite what it's like to be doing carnivore with that. You know, I think 2 weeks, 4 weeks is a good set. You know, 6 weeks, stuff is continuing to detox. The 1 year mark, it's still continuing to detox things like alcohol and drugs and different things. But I would encourage people to try to do it 6 weeks, maybe, not just 30 days, and get a little more of the bad out while you're putting the good in.
What they'll find out, Mike, I truly believe this is easy. Like I've done elimination diets before where you feel deprived. You know, I've done long water fasts, you know. There's no deprivation feeling in this diet. When I finish a meal, so I typically, right now, I'm eating 2 meals a day, but I eat in a window, time restricted. So I usually eat within a 6-hour window. And I did get off of coffee for a while, but I'm a long-term coffee drinker. Coffee's a bean, you know.
Black coffee?
Black coffee. And it's acceptable. It's not optimal, but think about it. It's a bean. Caffeine is actually a chemical compound that insects don't like. Again, the plant protecting itself from predators. And we know, so I drank decaf for a while, I abstained for a while, and now I'm kind of back doing 50-50 caffeine. But, you know, I have a cup of coffee in the morning. About 11 o'clock, I'll have my first meal. Might be a couple of hamburger patties, fattier, like 80-20. And
just the patties?
Just the patties. And you want to use the fat. Don't pour the grease off. You want the fat. And if you like butter, which I do, I tell you what, something I love now is you take good cold butter right out of the refrigerator, grass fed, and slice off just pats of butter, and with each bite of hamburger, put some butter on there. You can't really overdo the fat on this diet. In fact, you could do the opposite. You could undo the fat, and you're actually depriving yourself of the calories and nutrition you need. So a mistake that a lot of carnivores make when they're first trying this is falling, you know, victim to the long-term programming we've got that fat is bad, and they try to just eat the protein. You got to have them together. That's why ribeye is a great red meat cut, because there's a great proportion of fat to protein in a ribeye cut. Lean meat, there's nothing bad in it, but it doesn't have its own fat built in with it, and we need them together to be optimal. So when I eat that way, so that I might have 3 or 4 eggs with that hamburger patties. And that'll do me fine for 4, 5, 6 hours. And then maybe in the late afternoon, I might slow cook some chuck roast, a lot cheaper than steak. Slow cook it for 6 hours. You get that meat that's just falling apart and all the juices that go with it. It's like eating a bone broth beef stew. And sometimes I'll have a ribeye steak, and that'll be my second meal of the day. No counting calories. No, I just eat till I'm full. And you will feel full. And if it still tastes good to you and it's still like, you're anxious about it, then keep eating. When that fullness signal will go off and you just stop eating when you're ready to eat the next day. So it's super simple to do. It's not any more expensive than the diet I was eating before because I've cut out all these other things. And I will say, Mike, for the audience, I've completely stopped drinking alcohol. I wasn't drinking a lot over the last 6-7 years because I was still sick and trying not to tax my body with something it just didn't need, which alcohol is. I might drink a 12-pack of beer a year, but I'm not drinking alcohol at all anymore. And I don't think I ever will again because it's just a stressor your body doesn't need. It's ethanol and it's sugar. And you definitely can live a long and healthy life without alcohol. So what's the body treating it as? A poison, So I just want to mention that, that's something to consider, especially for a chronic illness patient.
So you said that you cooked your hamburger patties and reserved the grease.
Yep.
Do you filter that? Because I know hamburger patties sometimes get the little juices that come out of it, and it looks kind of iffy. And so what do you do with that grease? Do you pour back on there? Okay.
I'll eat my hamburger patties kind of in a bowl.
Okay.
All right. And when I pull them out, then I take the grease and just pour it right on top. Now, if you wanted to filter it, because there are other elements, but it all came from the hamburger patty.
Right.
If you did it on the grill, when you do it on the grill, it's not a bad thing, but you lose a lot of the fat. It burns away. And again, the fat is key. But if you do it on a grill, then you might add the butter trick into it. And I tell you, it sounded weird to me at first. Take a pat of cold butter and put it on the bite of a hamburger and eat it. Your body gives you signals when it likes something. I've shared this with others. I used to be a long distance backpacker,
Yep.
Number one food I always craved when I came off the trail after a week of eating peanut butter and tortillas and trail mix and horrible sugar-laden diet, I always be craving a greasy cheeseburger. Greasy cheeseburger, because my body wanted fat. Because there's very little fat in what you're eating on the trail. If you listen to your body and notice how you feel when you're eating these foods, even if they sound kind of odd together at first, pay attention. My body's like, oh man, this is awesome. Give me more of that. And then when it's done, it's done. So, it's reframing what we think about of fat. So I ordered a big tub of beef tallow, which is just beef fat. And that's a great cooking oil. I use butter as cooking oil. I will use some olive oil as long as it's good, real virgin olive oil, not blended stuff. And you got to be careful with that.
Yes.
When it comes in glass. And I will use avocado oil because, again, that's made from the meat, not the seed of an avocado. So it's a little bit different.
I use olive oil in producing a product called ozone oil.
Yes.
And I have found the only countries I trust are Greece and Italy. And if it comes from them, it tends to be higher quality oil, and it doesn't mess my product up.
Single source.
No, I think it's the export of the countries. The export standards are just higher than other countries, and so I've gotten to where if it's not Greek, and Greek is hard to find, so it's almost always the Italian.
Well, I think Greek and Italian olive oil. They think of their olive oil the way a Frenchman would think of a fine wine.
Yes.
They're not going to mix a bunch of other cheaper wines in and call it French. They're not going to do that in Italy. Olive oil is a premium product and should be. But a lot of the olive oils we get are blended, and not necessarily pure. But that's definitely acceptable in the carnivore. But beef tallow and butter make great cooking oils. We've been using them forever.
I do this still, but I'll talk about my grandma because that's where I got it from. But I remember she used to have a little white, glass thing of bacon grease that's just set out there by the stove all the time.
My grandmother used coffee cans.
Okay.
And I actually have not a coffee can, but I have a can that food came in, and I've kept it, and I saved my bacon grease. My mom did the same thing. It was always on the stove. You got ready to cook something, you just take a dollop of that. Not Crisco. I mean, Crisco, again, is an industrial product that came out of World War II. There is nothing nutritious or food-like about Crisco or canola oil, soybean oil. Throw them away. Throw them away. And any box or bag that you buy from the grocery store, read the ingredient labels. There's 20 different words at least for variations on sugar.
Oh,
And they do that on purpose because the more different words they can use, the less likely you're going to catch on that there's added refined sugar in there. Same thing for the seed oils. So if you got almost any refined ultra-processed product in the grocery store, it's going to have toxic seed oils in them, maybe more than one kind, and it's going to have refined, bastardized, pardon my French, forms of sugar in there, chemical sugar. And that is not what your body wants.
I think I'm not 100% sure of this, so I maybe shouldn't say it, but I'm going to. But I think when they do the hydrogenation process, I think they react that with an aluminum block, which is necessary for the hydrogenation process, for them partially hydrogenating those oils.
Yes.
I think that reacts with aluminum, which is also a known neurotoxin as well. You have any recipes or any favorite things that you like that, other than the cold butter on the warm hamburger, that people might not have thought about, that you've been pleasantly surprised as a go-to? You say it's very easy, but from a new person's perspective, I worry about the variety. I worry about needing a meal plan. And see, one thing that actually you said too is that you might eat 2 hamburger patties and a couple of eggs, and then a couple hours later you might need another meal also to keep it within your window.
That's just me, though. That's the way I'd been doing 1 meal a day for years. So that's just more my conditioning. I'm not hungry in the morning. I operate fine. I've always done the bulletproof coffee for years. So I put coconut oil and butter in my coffee and have for more than a decade, which is satiating. So I don't feel hungry until maybe around noonish, something like that.
Are you hungry 4, 5, 6 hours later when it comes?
Sometimes. And if I am, I eat.
Okay.
And if I'm not, I don't.
And if you're not, you don't. Okay.
Exactly. So again, we've lost the intimate relationship with our own hunger signals, because when you have glucose spikes and collapses, the body doesn't even recognize that it's eaten something. That's why you can eat a dozen donuts and not feel full. You never get that signal.
Right.
But the body does send you a signal when it feels full, and it's key that you eat fat. Fat is part of the signaling chemical process. So in answer to your question about variety, my resource would be just go onto YouTube now, because I cannot tell you how many more carnivores now have created YouTube channels. There are whole channels about unique carnivore recipes.
Okay.
I made carnivore deviled eggs a couple of weeks ago for a party I was going to. Just got online. I said, I'm doing carnivore. I can't make regular deviled eggs. I'm not eating mayonnaise, And they were delicious and easy as all get out. So literally just go on YouTube and put in carnivore recipes, and you'll get dozens of channels from long-term carnivore users who are cooks, and they've created all these. They've got sounds weird, but they've got carnivore pancakes.
Wow.
You use egg whites.
Okay.
You beat up an egg white, and you can make it into like a batter, and people will make that into a bun for a hamburger. Really creative, but they're all still just using that 4, 5, 6 ingredients, just in different ways. So I'm not the expert in that, and I'm not that creative, and I'm a pretty simple eater, but there's a lot of creative resources out there if somebody wanted to try this.
What about making sauces that would pour over the meat? Do anybody talk about that? Just giving the meat a little variety on taste, but you got to get the oils.
I haven't looked for it, because good meat has got all the flavor. When you keep the fat in, fat's what gives it flavor. When I was a little kid, I have memories that, when family would go out to eat, and I always wanted to eat the fat off the steak, because that was my mom would, oh no, let's cut that off. Cut the fat and gristle off. Right. And then you just eat the meat. Well, when you take the fat out, you're removing 90% of the flavor. There's a reason it tastes so good. It's sending us a signal that this is good for you. It's like when we force ourselves to eat a food that all by itself would not taste good. Like, if you ever just sat and ate a bowl full of raw kale?
Yeah, it's horrible.
We layer salad dressings and stuff on foods that all by themselves wouldn't taste very good. And we would never sit and eat a bowl of raw kale. Well, why? Why does your body react to it and say, well, I don't like the taste of this? Because your body's pretty smart. And it's saying, I will send you signals that this is good and you'll eat more of it. I will send you signals that this is bad, don't eat it. If it smells bad, don't eat it, So I'm sure there are sauces out there and those kind of things. You just got to be really careful that you're not bringing sugar into it. It's amazing when I've found, Mike, how little sugar you can ingest to knock your ketosis out of whack. Literally, and it may take you days to kind of get that out of your system and get back. Once you've fat adapted, they call it. Once you're fat adapted and you're really using that sustainable energy steady over time, when you get a glucose spike and you bring some sugar in, it does more damage than just that day. And it's not that you can't undo it, but it's going to take some work. So you just got to be careful with the ingredients and such.
Yeah, weekends are the trigger a lot of times too. That can easily knock you out of ketosis because you think this one meal won't matter, but then it takes days to get back into it. I've noticed that numerous times with weight loss on detoxes and things. A little bit too much of something you shouldn't have been eating, really.
And I can only speak from my own experience, but I just don't feel deprived. I don't. I look forward to, I've been doing it 60 days now. Yes, maybe a year from now I'd get bored and want to do something different. And I will say, I used to be a big cheese eater. And if it's good cheese, raw cheese, there's nothing bad in it. But you can overeat it really easily because it doesn't send the same signals. And I used to eat too much cheese. And I don't want to mindlessly eat like I used to, just shoving something in while I'm watching TV, that kind of thing. I want to eat consciously. And then when I'm done eating, I want to go do other stuff. I don't want to be worried about what I'm having for dinner tonight. It's amazing how freeing that is to the mind where you're not constantly programming yourself as to what's the next thing I'm going to shove in my mouth today.
So when you're going through the grocery or when you're looking for meat, what makes you decide one thing over another? How do you make your choices when you're doing that?
The fat content in the meat itself is critical. So that's why ribeye is but ribeye is expensive. And that's why you can do something like chuck roast, half the cost per pound. But it has a good fat content in it. And when done in the slow cooker, it makes it super tender, just meat that falls apart. It is so tasty and so much less expensive. But you really want to look at more fatty cuts of meat. Now, grass-fed, yes, there's a pro to that. But because of the way cows filter toxins, grain-fed is still really good too. A grain-fed steak is better than a McDonald's hamburger. You know what I mean? So if your budget, and you can get good ground beef, as long as it's got good fat content. Don't get the lean ground beef. Get the 80-20 if you can, something like that. And if you need to get the cheaper stuff, it's still better than the alternative. If you can afford grass-fed, great. I can't. You know me, I live off Social Security now, basically. But I watched my grocery bill pretty closely through the last 6 or 7 years, as I entered retirement. And my grocery bill hasn't gone up from switching over to Carnivore than it was a year ago with all the other foods I was buying.
What about using herbs?
I would say, that's the other thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Good salt, incredibly important. So, I use, really good sea salts, Celtic salts, and salt it to taste and don't underdo it. Salt was demonized through the years.
Right.
Good old-fashioned table salt is not salt. It's a chemical bastardization. But real salt is incredibly valuable. I'll use pepper, but not to excess. But mostly I just use salt. Other spices I think you'd have to examine on a case-by-case basis and ask yourself, what is this made of? Where did it come from? Is there any plant toxin in it that, I gotta weigh my value judgment here. I want the taste and I'll put up with the negative effects or whatever. But I think that would be a case-by-case examination.
Yeah, it would be interesting. We use a lot of cilantro. We use a lot of basil. There's other ones as well, but outside of that, those are the ones that we mainly use and we grow. But they're herbs, and they've got a lot of nutritional value that might not be in the plants themselves because they're so aromatic and everything.
Yeah, and you make that judgment call, and then you see your results in your own body. And I think most people wouldn't react negatively to that. But we do know some people that are super hypersensitive to almost anything these days. You know, we have friends in our lab support group that kind of deal with that. And they know what foods won't trigger them and what will. So some of us got to be more conscious about making those selections over time.
So if somebody wants to be open-minded and reevaluate what they have thought was the truth over the years and wanted to go down this route, I understand that it's just one day at a time. You know, don't think you're going to be doing 700 days on day one,
Right.
or 70 or even 7. But where do they start? If it's overwhelming, how do you make it simple? What advice do you have?
Well, if carnivore seems too extreme for you, and I get that, it sounds right off the bat that, oh my God, only meat and butter and bacon and eggs. A lot of people dip their toe in the water with a ketogenic diet,
Okay.
which would include super low carbohydrates and carbohydrates that only come from whole foods. So a piece of fruit, a vegetable. And it sounds more akin to what we're used to, that my plate has multiple things on it versus just a steak or a hamburger. But it still gets you into ketosis if you're careful. Ironically, my dad, this is long before any of these diets were coined, when I was 20 years old, this is 1980, my dad went on what was called the low carbohydrate diet, had a book that listed every food and amounts and how many carbs, and we were trying to keep under 60. I lost 50 pounds as a 20-year-old in about 3 or 4 months from that, and we ate a lot of meat. But we weren't thinking about fat then, it was just meat and avoiding carbohydrates. A ketogenic diet that does include some carbohydrates is saying keep it 20 or under. So a third of what my dad and I did all the way back then. Again, because you don't want to knock the body for long periods of time out of ketosis. You want it to be fat adapted, but that's maybe a little gentler way to ease into this and see how you react to it. But if you wanted to try the carnivore diet, all 3 of those docs I mentioned are great places to start. Dr. Sean Baker, he wrote one of the original books called The Carnivore Diet on this topic when he first started doing it. Some people might remember him. He went on the Joe Rogan podcast about a year into his own personal experiment. And that's where this whole topic kind of seemed to explode in social media. That was about 8 years ago. I actually saw it a few months before I tried my own carnivore experiment in 2018, which I was doing when you were helping me do a mercury detox. I was doing those 2 things at the same time. So there's a lot of good resources like, Dr. Baker out there that would help you kind of ease your way in and choose the option that's right for you, but don't rule it out. Again, I feel no negative side effects to this. I don't. The other aspect of this that is amazing to me is some people get concerned that you're going to get constipated on a carnivore diet.
Okay.
It's not been my experience at all, but what I will tell you is the volume and the number of movements that I'm having is far less. The theory behind that is your body is using far more of the food that you're taking in versus eliminating. We all know the story of how our bodies don't seem to digest corn. I won't go any further than that.
Right.
We all know why. So why is that? Why wouldn't your body use that kernel of corn? It doesn't seem to be the case with the meat. The amount of waste that's coming out of a human being on the carnivore, at least in my experience, and the other ones I've read about, is far less because the body's able to utilize far more of the food itself and put it to work, and it doesn't have waste products that are coming out. But no constipation, no side effects to that.
That's great. I have one more question or just thought, really. And it's on, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this. This is my own observations and research that I've done. But it seems like digesting proteins for humans is kind of a tough ordeal. And it's quite a burden on our bodies and our stomachs. And what happens is it starts producing stomach acid, but the stomach acid has to get very strong to activate an enzyme that digests the proteins. And it seems like in the interim, when it's getting stronger, the stomach acid getting stronger to prepare to digest the protein, that other things are digesting the fats and the sugars and things that don't take as long to So, in digesting proteins being hard on humans, it makes sense to me to want to try to ease the burden of digestion on us. In general, if we know that the digesting proteins is hard, I think personally that using outside digestive enzyme support would help because it would alleviate some of the hours that it takes for your stomach acid to get strong enough. And people almost seem surprised that they're not getting constipated and things like that because it seems like maybe they think that they should. And so I guess there would definitely be a transition period. You might be eating more fat. Digestive enzyme support would help with the fat in the diet
Definitely
also.
couldn't hurt, Mike, and you know this, but I learned the value of digestive enzymes primarily from you. And I think you remember in one of our Lyme support groups, a holistic pharmacist came and gave us a talk on the same topic and basically just reiterated what you had taught us with your lecture. And so I've been getting my digestive enzymes from you. And while I've been on this carnivore diet, I'm still taking those. So I take 1 or 2 tablets typically before a meal. I don't think there's any downside to that. And you mentioned that, it may take time for our stomach acid to improve. Most people think and again, this is something you and he both taught me. Most people think that acid reflux is an acid problem. It's not. It's an alkaline problem. Our hydrochloric acid in our stomach should be a certain pH. Over time, if that pH gets too alkaline, then, like people that swallow their food without chewing, they don't get the signals sent to close the sphincter at the top of the stomach because you're getting ready to digest food and that acid's going to work. The sphincter stays open and then the gases can come up into your throat and cause reflux.
Yes.
And that's a lack of acid problem. So the digestive enzymes, I think, why not take them? Maybe you can experiment later on after you've adapted to this diet and pull them out and see what happens and see if you notice anything. But I think you're right. And I don't want to candy coat. Some people do have kind of a rough time the first couple of weeks when they make the transition to this diet. A lot of us have lost our gallbladders. We're in this mindset where some of our organs are disposable. Appendices, tonsils. I can't tell you how many people in my family have had, their gallbladders removed. Well, bile is an absolute critical substance to digest fat. And if you haven't eaten a lot of fat, even if you've got your gallbladder for years, your bile production is probably going to take some time before it comes up to a level that it really can process the meat and protein and fat properly. So there may be a transition period where you've got some discomfort for a while, but it will pass. It will definitely pass over time. And the digestive enzymes, I think, are a no-brainer. You should go on and keep taking them.
So if it makes sense, take some digestive enzymes.
Yep.
It's going to help everything in the process. And continue to take them because it's easing the burden of digestion. Yep. If it makes sense, do some research on this diet, this revitalization diet. Everybody is going to be different and results are going to be different. I think people should thoroughly research it. Maybe have your meal plan, what you're roughly going to eat before you go to the grocery store so that you have a plan and it's not just overwhelming. You could have eggs for dinner. Maybe, you don't do it every day, but I think that would be fine as well.
Let's do it one day at a time.
Yeah, I think it would be wise to set an end goal, and that can be moved if you like it, but just don't think you're going to do it forever from day one. Let's try it for a week. Let's try it for 30 days. I think you should try it for 45 days, which is 6 weeks. And then, you're just going to do it one day at a time. But give yourself an end goal so that there is an end to your experiment and it might become a lifestyle change.
It's a lot easier than I think people will think.
And I think that the satiety that you're talking about and the feeling of fullness that you have is something that people aren't used to.
Yeah, and I think the trying to be aware of the possibility of mindless eating, that's usually where we get tripped up. Like maybe take a 30-day fast from watching TV at night. Because that's usually when the mindless eating takes place. At least it used to for me.
Boredom.
Yeah, take a walk instead. If you do feel a craving for something, take a walk for 30 minutes. You know, I told you when I was 20, I was really overweight. And that's what I used to do when I'd get a craving in the evening. I would just go out and walk around the neighborhood until it was gone. And it will go. You know, a lot of times it's just because you're thirsty and you're dehydrated. So water is another key thing. Lots of water. Don't gulp it. Don't guzzle it down. 8 ounces every half hour to an hour all throughout the day. Stay hydrated. Makes a big difference.
Is there any little go-to if you don't have meat but you're hungry? You said water. Is there any other little go-tos that you can
might
use?
like salami, hard salami.
Okay.
You know, try to make sure that it's not got sugar added in it. You know, it's just you got to pay attention to the labels on those because you don't want sugar at all. The beef sticks, like I picked up a big packet at Costco the other day of these great beef sticks. You know, and I just grab one of those if I need something just to munch on, you know, something like that. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, hey, that's an easy one. You just need your little backup plan just in case you don't want to cook the meat and eat the meat. You could have some of this stuff on the go. Logan, it's been great talking to you.
Mike, thank you so much. And hopefully some people get some value out of this.
Oh, you're going to help people. Yeah, especially people that are having a lot of inflammation in their joints. They're creaky, they're achy, they don't feel like they're self. They're looking for something else to try that's scientifically based. I think this is a great approach. I am looking forward to trying it in a month or so.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm going to do my 6-week detox.
One of my other best friends is going to join me for the last 30 days in July.
When you're getting done is when I'll be starting.
Cool. All right, we'll keep in touch.
Thanks for your time and your patience and your education and your just drive to help people, Logan. It's very refreshing to have you on.
Appreciate it, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
buddy.
you.